fill you in on that as well.
Okay.
I don't know
Okay.
some of the details, but we have a good team working on the activities here.
Mhm.
Okay, that would be
Okay.
good because at the
Yeah.
moment we
Yeah.
I should start by
are
saying my team is really small and
screening the
It's a
growing,
market
good
but
idea.
we're
for
just starting.
platforms
So
for
I'll talk
data
about a few of the
analytics,
projects that
both
we're
in
just
terms
starting
of
with.
data visualization
We've started
platforms, but
to do
also
population
data
mapping, and
analytics
in
tools
fact in
that
partnership
can
with the World
be
Bank.
embedded in our
So
own
based
more
on
traditional
high
systems.
resolution satellite imagery,
Basically, we're
and
creating
we've mapped some
an,
African countries.
an extra
Um,
layer. I mean, we have
but
our
we're
traditional
looking for ideas.
production
I think
environment,
we're
which is
unsure at this
more or
point
less
I
how to
think you're
legacy
cooperate, how
systems.
to
dressed
partner
So
with
right.
governments
It's
and
so
allow
like
business
warm.
to work with
very nice.
non-governmental
Oh, I can't
organizations.
take this
Right
off.
beside
That
it's gonna get
governments
warmer and
definitely
warmer
see
as
us
we
as
Yeah.
come
great
in.
partners.
Now you're
Unfortunately, I
tied.
can't.
Now you're tied in.
Yeah.
Create another data lake-based layer
Yeah,
where you are pulling the data that you have in your
I
traditional
know
environment
Kenya.
plus other sources, and then you will need different tools, a combination of, let's say, statistical tools and, let's say, more sophisticated data analytics tools to
Yeah,
engage with the data, basically, in a freer way than the pure, let's say,
yeah,
production environment.
Right. No, that's actually a common pattern
Yeah,
I've seen pretty often. So I'd love to talk to you about that. I mean, you have some really great tools,
yeah, I know, I
yeah.
know.
and
Yeah.
good success stories here. I gave a presentation earlier this week with the International Civil
It's really
Aviation
interesting.
Ah,
Authority,
I mean,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
going to
using
talk
our
about a
platform for
yeah,
recent
yeah,
this
collaboration we did with
exact model
UNICEF,
where
and
they didn't really
if
change
we
their
had gone
legacy
through that
systems.
formal
They built a
partnership
really cool
agreement,
yeah, yeah,
it would
yeah.
have
they use
taken
some of
a
the
year,
modern
and we wanted to. It
technologies.
was in
That's
response to the
the
Zika
thing that makes
crisis,
most
so we
sense.
wanted to
Yeah,
do something quickly, and we were all
also
kind of
because
like,
you want to
okay, this
introduce
is
this
really
innovation
important
without disrupting
and makes
let's
sense.
say,
So let's ask
ongoing processes
forgiveness
and,
rather than
and
permission, and just
production
like
of
get this done.
information.
Right.
Um,
And then not even
and it
you know
worked, but
use it once
it,
and then
I think getting
And even within the
started is sometimes
Commission,
the hardest
widely,
part.
I mean, not just purely in the statistical area, there is an effort to create these capabilities to generate,
Yeah,
let's say, more rapid evidence, more tailored evidence for decisions, for policies. And again,
yeah,
one of the areas where one of the building blocks of these capabilities is infrastructure and
yeah,
platforms that would that we would need. And again, people are now thinking a bit more, let's say, out of the
Totally.
box,
hmm
including
something we're
purchasing this
starting
thing as a
to build
service
a
or
prototype
using this
of
thing as a service rather
is
than
to use a cloud service
a,
for building
a
yes,
blocks.
building
now we are
impact series.
slowly
And the
moving
idea
into
is to
that.
get government ministries to
First
come
as
in
a
with their policy
platform, but
problems and
then
to pair them with data
also
scientists, and to have
considering
it
the
be a
possibility of
session that's really
Good
interactive.
morning,
facilitate
everyone.
services on
I
top of
I
the
would,
platform itself.
as you are coming in, I would really encourage you to come forward, so that we'll have a more cozier discussion. It's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pleasure.
I don't like to keep distance. We'll give it another minute or two before we start. I know people are still managing their way in after a fun night, I heard.
She deserves a little break, I think. Live is amazing.
Should get a badge.
Hashtag data fighting.
quickly expanding.
But you can see that. So I mean, and interactions are given, okay? Because then panel gone, right? Because we on the side we look at the entire development ecosystem. So that's those are the neat changes we've seen.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting how quickly it evolves.
I guess we can.
Last time I met him, I really didn't know much.
Yeah.
Hmm?
Just started backpacking, marching around.
Yeah.
Right? He doesn't have to backpack.
All right. All right, let's get started. Good morning, everyone. Big warm welcome to all of you, including those who are watching this web stream online, to this session on the future of data. My name is Haishan Fu, the director of the Development Data Group at the World Bank. This morning at the breakfast, one of my colleagues reminded me how the history is filled with funny examples of those who failed to see the road to the future. In 1927, I believe it's Harry Warner, who is the Warner Brothers studio co-owner, was exacerbated by the fact there's an emerging fashion for the soundtracks in movies and cinemas. That's toward the end of the silent movie age. He famously said, "Who the hell wants to hear actors talk?" Well, we all know how the history has shaped up. So I would really like to make sure through such a discussion that we will avoid in 20 years' time or even 2 years' time to look back and have a similar reactions. I know, as a statistician, the nature of our job dictates that we normally look at what's already happened and not really so keen on doing projections. But I would really like us to take this panel and take our 5 panelists as 5 data points and try to do some extrapolation to see what's coming our way. At the bank, our group like to think our mission is to put data to work for development. And we do so by really leveraging our expertise, our partnerships, and as well as a very healthy dose appetite for innovation. So when we were asked by the program committee to organize this track of the forum on innovation, we were very enthusiastic. But very soon we realized the content that we could really fit in perhaps deserve a whole conference of its own because so much have happened. There's no business as usual anymore. Once was mostly official statistic dominant data world has been evolved or had been evolving into a large network of different stakeholders or players who can offer different kind of data sources and different kind of platforms and data products. So really, we must be really standing on our toes rather than sitting comfortably and really look at what is the future, how should we not only prepare ourselves, but also more proactively get engaged in order to shape up how we're going to do things in the future. I'm really, really pleased to join 5 remarkable people. To my left, you all look at them, they look normal. And I know they have very different look, a physical look, and different temperament when you talk to them. But I'm sure you will also realize very soon, as I did, that they all share a very similar trait. They're all very passionate. They're also very dynamic, intellectually inquisitive, and also very action-oriented and really in the mode of change and innovation. So we have, to my left, at the very end, Emmanuel Baldacci, who is the Chief Information Officer of Eurostat. He joked with me that every 3 years, when he got a LinkedIn reminder he reached another work anniversary, he get antsy. He started to look at what is the next he should be doing. So it's really on that spirit. He has moved around in different fields, and now he has just taken on the role of a CIO. We also have young Molly Jackson from Facebook. She's the public policy research manager. I always wondered why she's so calm and cool, so measured, without realizing she has been a long-time yoga teacher. And last time when she came to Cape Town, she actually did shark diving. I don't know how many of you have tried, but it definitely showed in this very quiet figure, there's a very bold spirit. We also have Mark Ryland, maybe I didn't pronounce your name right, who is the chief architect at Amazon Web Services. You would not know if you look at CV because he has been working for over 25 years as a technologist. Actually, Mark studied philosophy and law. So you can imagine what kind of person with what kind of spirit and for exploration discovery moved from philosophy to technology and is taking on this huge, huge role. We also have Andy Tatum, who is sitting next to me. He's the director of World Pop Project and co-director of FlowMinder. I know this is a company registered in Sweden, right? I know Sweden is a country of a lot of people very mindful. We have got to know Gapminder. Now we get to know FlowMinder, who is also doing remarkable innovative works, combining different kind of data together and offer us a lot of new insights. He told me last time he was in Cape Town, he did a ride on ostrich. And I'm sure that's the experience he can relate to you later. Last but not least, we have Philip Tigo, who is the Senior Advisor, Data and Innovations Office of the Deputy President in Kenya. I asked him whether he has any fun fact he wants me to share. He said, I'm just a bundle of joy. No matter where you go, you can hear me laugh, even though without being intoxicated by any drinks. So here we have 5 very interesting, very dynamic people. Let's hear from them. First, let me turn to Andy. I'd really love to start with you because I'm very intrigued. I got into your website and started to read about what you guys are doing with the World Pop Project. You really cut across the range of issues we're discussing today by combining multiple data sources, developing creative methodology, and using the available technologies very creatively to tackle some of the most pressing questions we have. So why don't you tell us a bit about how you got started doing this and what you have been working on and where you're heading?
Sure. This is working. Hello. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I trained as a geographer, and it's been fantastic coming to so many sessions and seeing so much geospatial analysis going on. It feels like geography has finally become a cool discipline. When I was training, I did my university degree. That wasn't the case. My engineer, medic friends said training as a geographer meant I was very good at coloring in. I could stay within the lines of maps, and so my daughter is still impressed by my coloring in skills. Things have moved on, and what we were doing in that degree was very much looking at some of the first satellite imagery that came along. We, at that stage, for downloading global satellite images, we had to have our own station based on the roof and download the data and onto huge servers to go out and collect data on a GPS. We didn't have our mobile phones. We had a kind of Ghostbusters-style backpack that went around and scared people in villages. So things have changed, and after my PhD, I went to work with the Kenya Medical Research Institute, working on the first evidence-based malaria maps. So it's the start of the Malaria Atlas project. And it was really a recognition that malaria risk changed locally. Wherever you went, there was great heterogeneity. And it was only by collecting data on that heterogeneity that you could really reveal those patterns. You could identify where the vulnerable populations were that were being missed out and build an evidence base for tailoring interventions. So when you have limited resources, how could you best use them? And the Malaria Atlas Project has now gone on to partner with the World Health Organization to produce their estimates, to identify vulnerable populations. And my role came in as working out, we've done great efforts on producing estimates of amount of malaria prevalence in 5 by 5 kilometer grid squares. We then wanted to work out how many people were affected, so we wanted population maps. And we realized through working with statistics officers that the data that were available were often outdated. They were often of quite old data, quite coarse scale data. And so we started working with statistics officers, firstly in East Africa, on assembling that data to produce new population maps. And that, when we combined that with our malaria maps, we really saw how the numbers estimated at risk changed substantially. So once you're actually getting that subnational detail and highlighting those local heterogeneities, we're getting much more improved estimates of numbers of people affected. We're identifying those hotspots, those vulnerable populations. And that led to the birth of, firstly, the AfriPop project, where we expanded across Africa. We then got funding to expand to the rest of the malaria endemic world, so we started the AsiaPop project. We then moved to the Americas. We realized AmeriPop was a terrible name, so we merged everything together and started WorldPop. Really, whenever we're looking at these data, whether it's disease data, demographic data, we see these great heterogeneities. And so we focused on gathering together as much of that data as possible. And each time we get finer and finer level data, it changes our estimates. And this is, I think, reflected in what we're seeing in terms of transitioning from the Millennium Development Goals that are measured at a national level, and you can improve the poverty levels of your biggest city and meet the Millennium Development Goal and leave behind the rest of the country. The SDGs now have a leave no one behind agenda, so we're having to think subnationally. We're having to measure that heterogeneity, and this is where we combined together with colleagues to start the FlowMinder Foundation to really use data science to map and understand where vulnerable populations are. We're now a group of around 70 researchers, data scientists, demographers, ecologists, medical doctors, and we build methods to complement traditional data sources. So we make sure everything is, all the data sets we produce are open, they go through peer review, and so you can see where everything comes from, where the assumptions are and where the uncertainties are in our estimates. And some of the projects that we've worked on, for instance, are always problem-driven. We're not finding some cool data and thinking, what can we do with it? There's a problem to be tackled. So one of the examples is working with the Ministry of Health in Zanzibar, who'd been tasked by the World Health Organization to estimate, to come up with estimates of how much malaria was being imported into their islands. There was really no good data on population movements, and we'd seen a study in Nature using mobile phone data to estimate population movements. So we went to the mobile company, accessed data there, and produced the first kind of use of these kind of data in estimating importation rates of malaria. Since then, we've done similar things, working with the World Food Programme in Haiti to estimate impacts of the hurricane that recently came through, displacements of population, the Nepal earthquake in a similar fashion. So integrating different types of data, so mobile data that gives us movements of SIM cards, but then adjusting that and accounting for the biases in those data, adjusting to the population totals. And now we're ongoing projects with, for instance, the government of Afghanistan, who haven't had a census since 1979. And it's a request that comes from the president to explore new approaches to come up with new numbers. And this is integrating very high-resolution satellite images to map individual buildings, settlements, and then combining that with micro-sensor surveys of small areas as training data to then predict across the country. And those will hopefully be used as new data sets to guide election planning. And finally, expanding our population mapping in a large collaboration to provide the global denominators for new estimates of disease and various health burdens. But yeah, to summarize, I think the importance is all about integrating different data sources, whether it's a mobile data set that gives us the movement of SIM cards. That's on its own not great, it's not useful. We want to provide context and turn those SIM cards into people, and to do that we need to have household surveys on mobile phone usage, biases in terms of coverage rates. We need to have population data to look at 1,000 SIM cards moving from one region. Is that a big movement? Is it coming from an area where there's 1,000 people? Is it an entire region moving? Or is it coming from a large city and that's a normal movement? So that's really our focus. I think this data integration is where things are heading.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad you didn't stay within the lines of the map, as we often tell our kids when they're doing their coloring book. You know, it's really about getting out of where you're comfortable and seeing how when things integrated, what new insight they could tell us. Now, let's move to Mark. Amazon, as we all know, a huge technology and platform providers, an increasingly important part of our lives. Even we don't know sometimes that's the case. But please, I know you've been doing a lot, and also with a lot of information you've been able to generate through your business process. You're increasingly play a role in the area of public data and statistics. So could you tell us a bit how you see this whole thing is evolving?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Well, thanks first of all. I'd like to thank everyone for being here and for inviting us to participate. It's very exciting to be part of a community which is, trying to increase public goods and seeking greater outcomes for people around the globe. And we're very humbled and excited to be part of that community and provide platform support for a lot of those efforts. So those of you who are in the IT industry, I'm sure will have heard of Amazon Web Services, a division of Amazon, but I'll just briefly tell the larger audience, because some people still may wonder, why is Amazon up on stage for talking about information technology? More than 10 years ago, as a large e-commerce platform provider, we began to run into some challenges as we scaled our business. What we found was that our software engineering team spent more and more of their time dealing with infrastructure, with ordering servers, with installing them, with racking and stacking and getting power contracts and networking contracts and building data centers, all this work that's difficult, but it's exactly the same for every single team. It's only when you begin to write application code or when you begin to build analytics tools or model particular new data sets, that's the first time that you're creating differentiated value. Everything you're doing prior to that, in terms of just building out IT infrastructure, is exactly the same pretty much across the globe for all users. So the leaders of our company had this insight: why don't we build an infrastructure platform where software defines what you need, you acquire servers and storage with an API call, with a software call, you pay for it just while you're using it, and then you get rid of it when you're done with it. So that was the insight that led to the launch of Amazon Web Services, which was the first vendor to really launch this notion of infrastructure as a service. Now, I want to make clear that when I speak here, I'm speaking of my own experiences. I'll talk a lot about Amazon, but really I'm talking about a major technological shift across the industry. There are many other players. There's a lot of exciting things happening, and we're still in early days of this revolution, but it truly is a revolution in how infrastructure and information technology can provide a new and super efficient platform for the kinds of uses that this community really needs. So what exactly is this we're providing? You can think of it as it's a utility computing service. So we're all used to the idea of utilities, electric grids, for example. You don't think about, when you start a small business or build a home, you don't think about a generator as a necessary part. You might, under certain circumstances, you might consider that, but in general, we all get our power from the electric grid, and we pay per use, so we only pay for the kilowatts that we use. We don't think about the capital investment, we don't think about the modernization, we don't think about the increases in efficiency, we don't think about directly think about, improving the sustainable energy. We leave that to the power companies, and we work with them to build better and better infrastructure as consumers, as regulators, and so forth. You can think about cloud computing as a utility computing service exactly in the same way. Connect to the internet, build a secure tunnel over that for your sensitive data, and then utilize computing and storage, pay by the hour, pay by the gigabyte, pay by the usage, and when you're not using it, shut it down. This has really revolutionized users of IT in a very profound way. And again, still early days, but we're seeing tremendous uptake of this type of capability, allowing, I think the one thing I really want to emphasize, it's a democratizing force. Things that used to require millions and millions of dollars of capital investment to do, like buying supercomputers or building, renting supercomputer time, that's now available to anyone with a few $100s. They can stand up a large cluster, 1,000 servers, process terabytes of information, get the results they want, shut it down. And that whole process can take hours rather than weeks or months or years. And you can pay just hundreds of dollars rather than millions of dollars for that type of capability. So it's quite revolutionary. I think another thing that is creating kind of this perfect storm of change and efficiency improvement is the open source revolution, which we're all living through as well. Nowadays, some of the very best tools that you can get for data manipulation, data analytics are free. They're available because companies either have business models where the value of the source code for the tools is not a primary part of their business, or because they monetize their investment in tools by providing a service, a cloud-based service. So for example, Mapbox is an open source company who sells GIS services from Amazon over the web, but you can download their source code. That's not where their primary value is maintained. Facebook is a great participant, for example, in the open source community. Some of the most sophisticated analytics tools, there's a tool called Presto, for example, which allows you to use traditional SQL language to query a distributed cluster system. And that's something that the Facebook engineers have essentially just given away. It's really literally tens of millions of dollars of engineering effort goes into building and maintaining these sophisticated technology, but it's freely available to the community because from their perspective, it's their data that's valuable, not the source code that manipulates the data. So that revolution is happening simultaneously, and this is kind of a perfect storm for a community like this because you have access both to very cheap, reliable, and secure infrastructure, paying only for what you need with no capital investment, but also tools that are cheap, reliable, and really state-of-the-art, and that are evolving rapidly. It's really a very dynamic environment, a really exciting platform. And again, the beauty of a large-scale system like ours is tremendous efficiency through economies of scale. We literally deploy every day enough infrastructure to power our company 10 years ago. So when Amazon was a $5 billion e-commerce company, we had a certain amount of computing and storage. That amount, which we ran our entire business on, that's our daily deployment in these large-scale, very fast-growing infrastructure businesses. And again, you gain the benefits of that through our economies of scale, through great supply chain management, through high efficiency. So the average utilization of the servers in these large-scale systems is much higher than typically in a private data center, which means more power efficiency. It also means that we and many other of the large players are committed to sustainable energy. So we're committed to green power across our entire infrastructure. By the end of around 2018, we should be at 100% sustainable energy. I think Google announced they're going to do that in 2017. Facebook has made huge strides in that area. So you see not only the efficiencies in terms of saving money, but you are also now participating in very state-of-the-art platforms that allow you to be using compute infrastructure in a super efficient way. So we have, that's kind of enough about our platform. What's exciting to me is the uses that people put to it. It's amazing the creativity this unleashes. I think there's something we all recognize is that humans are tool makers. But when we make tools, we in some ways are modified by our tools. The tools circle back and cause us to do things differently once they exist. And what we're seeing in the cloud computing revolution is just the simple availability of these new capabilities and concepts is dramatically changing how people even approach problems in the first place. Things like, and unintended consequences of things like an open data platform are really astounding. I'll talk a little bit more about this actually in the next time period, we have a breakout session to talk about some of these same issues. I'll give a bunch of use cases and examples. But I'll give a couple right now that I think are really powerful. We released an open data set in the United States. It's called the NextRad data, which was the National Oceanographic Administration's detailed radar data about weather. And what happened was some ornithologists who study bird migration patterns realized that this radar data picks up bird migration. And no one had really ever thought about that before. So now they have this rich historical data sets about where birds are flying in this geographic area, and it completely enhances their scientific research. But no one, until that data was out there and available for processing, no one had actually thought of that. And so another great example is with the Sentinel-2 satellite data in Europe. We're seeing a huge ecosystem growing around that. PricewaterhouseCoopers just released a report in November 2016 with an analysis that showed about the program costs around 7 billion euro, and they believe that it will generate about 6 billion additional euro net benefit in terms of the economic value of this Earth observation platforms and so forth. And to give one great example of again, sort of unintended consequences through innovation, there's a German startup called Building Radar. And what they're doing is they're using this high-resolution open satellite imagery to actually, they started a business where they will tell you through both analysis and machine learning, they will tell you when someone starts a building project. So think about that. Now for the first time, whether you're in commerce and you want to know about what's going on out there, or whether you're a regulator, you actually have this completely new way of thinking about and understanding what's happening in terms of building projects. And you know, again, the opportunities are unlimited. Once we open up data, once we allow the mashup of data, and once we have the tools that are cheap and easily available, then the creativity of humans kicks in and amazing things happen. So we're really excited to be part of the community and to continue in our dialogue here today.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'm sure there are a lot of questions, and we will have opportunity as soon as we get a chance to each of our panelists. Now, Molly, Facebook, what a part of our lives, you know, either professional or personal. I was a dormant user. I only signed up in order to track my kids, but they have long unfriended me, moved on to Snapchat. But every day, I am on Facebook. So in recent years, you have taken advantage of your own platform and trying to engage and see how you can help improve public information. So could you tell the audience a bit about what you have been up to?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So I think that when people think about Facebook, they think about the product. And there are a lot of really valuable applications, from keeping track of your children and grandchildren to the social good products that we release, like Safety Check, which allows you to share whether you're safe with friends and family after a crisis. We've started to explore how data generated through the Facebook platform can also provide social impact. So my background, like Andy, is in quantitative social science. I started off as a professor of political science, and I started to see this interesting shift. So 50 years ago, the vast majority of data was held by universities and governments. Today, it's held in the private sector. And so I started to see all my friends trickling into jobs at Facebook and Google and Amazon. And the potential to leverage that data for social good, to have a really positive impact on society, seemed tremendous. And that's when I decided to make the shift. So I want to talk about 3 very different approaches that we've started to use to leverage Facebook's scale, reach, capacity, and people to generate new sources of data. The first is probably the approach that you all most typically associate with big data and social media data, which is aggregating information that's organically generated on the Facebook platform. So a recent example is a collaboration we did with UNICEF Brazil. So during the recent Zika outbreak, UNICEF wanted to educate people about how to protect themselves. And health organizations for a long time have known that if you want to create an effective public campaign to fight a disease, you have to understand the state of the public conversation so you can create messaging that will resonate with people and really meet them where they are. But traditionally, they would have relied on focus groups or surveys, which, as you all know, are extremely important, but also require trade-offs in terms of the time they take, the expense, and therefore the representativeness. So we decided to team up because Facebook turned out to be a very natural place for people to have conversations about Zika. 108 million Brazilians are on Facebook every month, which is more than 90% of Brazil's online population. And it wasn't a surprise to us when we saw huge spikes in conversations around Zika during the outbreak, because people come to Facebook to talk about issues that they care about with their friends and family. So our team was able to aggregate and anonymize data on the Zika conversation and to provide those insights to the UNICEF team. And some of them were really surprising and counterintuitive. One, for instance, was that men were actually talking about Zika more than women in Brazil. So UNICEF was able to take that insight and to activate men as advocates and allies in the fight against Zika. We also found something that was really interesting, again, to me, was that the media and UNICEF and a lot of different people were focusing on Zika primarily, but people cared about the whole suite of mosquito-borne diseases. So they were talking about yellow fever and dengue and chikungunya, not just Zika. And they were really afraid of these diseases and wanted information about how to protect themselves. So again, UNICEF was able to take that information and to provide people with messaging around how to fight mosquito-borne diseases more generally. And the impact of this was really profound. So we were able to help UNICEF measure the impacts of their campaigns on the platform. And to give some context and a baseline, the previous UNICEF campaign, which was not data-driven, reached 60,000 people, so by no means trivial. Within the first hours of them launching this data-driven campaign, the first one, it reached 4 million people within hours. And you could see in the comments that the messaging was really resonating. People were saying, please share this. This will help us protect ourselves. We also did a poll to figure out if, to test whether the campaign was effective. So we looked at people who saw the campaign and those who didn't. And we saw that a full 82% of those who saw the campaign said that they would take action to protect themselves from Zika. So while we weren't measuring behavioral change directly, this was certainly indicative that the campaign was resonating and that leveraging social media data to inform this sort of action could make a real difference and potentially even save lives. So a second approach is using the platform really deliberately and using the reach of the platform in order to take the public's pulse on issues that matter. And I'll talk about a collaboration between the World Bank and the OECD and Facebook on the Future of Business survey. I should give a shout out here to the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data for bringing us together. I think some of the hardest parts of these partnerships is getting them off the ground. And through the Global Partnership, we were able to connect and really find this shared interest in understanding, well, first, in generating better data for better decision making. And second, in understanding small businesses' perceptions so that we could create better policies, better products, and to connect businesses with each other so that they could learn. So the survey takes place every month. It exists in 33 countries, and we reach out to small businesses with an online presence, small businesses with a Facebook page. And this approach has 3 really unique advantages. The first is the scale. So we started off with 17 countries, and within a few months, we had 22. And we announced yesterday 33, and we have an intention to grow from there. So it's really easy. It's almost costless for us to expand this survey, which is representative at a national level, to additional countries. The second is the reach. So the World Bank and the OECD were really helpful in identifying the questions that we needed to ask small businesses in order to derive policy-relevant insights. And we were able to ask them to the largest online community of small businesses in the world. There are 60 million SMEs on Facebook currently. So far, we've reached 140,000 of them, which represents a 40% increase over the last 3 months. And then the third piece of the survey is adaptivity. So we did kind of a soft launch of the survey in September to get some learnings. And literally on the day of the launch, we all went down to the basement of the OECD and we said, what are we hearing? And we were hearing that people were really interested in gender management and they were interested in trade. So a week later, we were able to add modules to the survey about those 2 issues. And we published reports yesterday, 3 months later, on the results. And we're already starting to see learnings from this survey impact how we think about products at Facebook, how inform policy decisions, and hopefully inform the tactics of businesses themselves. So the third and final approach I'll talk about is using the methodologies that we're developing and our capacity in order to process data at scale and generate really unique data sets. A few months ago, we released the first population density data sets with CSIN and the World Bank for 5 countries. So our team at Facebook used state-of-the-art convolutional neural networks to develop a model that can identify individual buildings in satellite images around the globe. And then our partners helped us translate that information into estimates of population density. And we were able to produce the most granular maps of population density available to date. So we started this work at Facebook because we wanted to design the best communications technologies for each region. And in order to do that, you have to know how populations are dispersed, because you'll deploy a different technology to a very rural, very sparse population than you will to a city center. But as we started to hear from partners, we realized that these maps could be immensely valuable to other organizations who are seeking to fulfill their own missions. So for example, the Red Cross is exploring how they can use these maps to help combat malaria in Malawi, and also to inform humanitarian intervention after a crisis. By sharing our data and our approach to problem solving, we're hoping that we can stimulate an open approach to solving global and local challenges. So those are 3 very different models for data generation, and I've given 3 examples, but that's really just the beginning, and we're interested to explore how those models can extend in the future.
Thank you so much, Molly, and also World Bank has been so excited, and we're really appreciating the opportunity to work with you to explore some of these new approaches. Okay, let's move to Philip. We all know Kenya has a very vibrant technology community, and innovation is very high on your national agenda, especially in the current process of developing a roadmap towards achieving the SDGs, both for reporting but also for the kind of information needed for generating action. So could you share with us your thought, where you are and where you're heading with this effort?
Thank you, Shan. Is this on? Thank you, Shan. I think basically, as we say in Kenya, I don't think this is.
I'm not sure. So. Why don't you use that?
After all that,
For sure,
here it goes.
Try it.
oh, now it works. For sure, this mic is not going in the future. Neither is paper. So Kenya, as you well know, I think, is what we call the leapfrog capital of the world. We were very engaged in the formation of the SDG process. For those who know Ambassador Macharia, Kamau, who was in the opening plenary. And Kenya takes very seriously, I think, this whole notion of development discourse. And our idea basically has been that, and from the founding principles of the country to the new constitution that was adopted in 2010, that the very basis of government or the very basis of development must be a co-creation model. And innovation and data provides that engine or that raw material. So before going to the future, we have to look at the past. In the era of MDGs, it took us about 4 years just to get off the block. So signed 2000, got off the block in 2004. Come SDGs, we started 6 months before. And data really provided that possibility. So Kenya actually started thinking about an SDG roadmap 6 months before September as signing of the SDGs. And we started conversations around looking at the kind of resources we have around, looking at the opportunities and possibilities. And what data did was it enabled us to understand our development progress is not only dependent on internal players, but it's actually dependent also on other players beyond the continent and abroad. And because technology is really beyond borders, we started understanding that data then provides that opportunity to begin to understand where these players are, what kind of data sets they hold, and how that can benefit the country. So we, as you know, were one of the anchor partners or founding members of the Global Partnership on Sustainable Development Data. And the reason why Kenya literally just jumped into that, even without understanding what a data roadmap is or what a data revolution was, is because we understood that if we get it right, and really if we get it right, then the whole disruptive concept of leaving no one behind would actually become a possibility. So we started evolving this roadmap, and interesting enough, we started seeing a couple of new things. One is that I think we started seeing the nature of relationships changing. Then because it wasn't about maybe Facebook or Amazon being the holders of data, then we started looking at everybody as a producer of data. And therefore, we started looking at what is it that they're bringing on the table. The second thing we started looking at is who are the non-traditional players who are very critical to this new development paradigm of the SDGs. So we started looking at universities, but not necessarily the Harvards or the MITs. For those who know 4 years ago, that was really where we were looking at in terms of innovation and data. Started looking at local universities and what capacities and capabilities that they have. We started looking at technical universities, who in most cases we never really looked at. We started validating or valorizing innovation hubs, who are really at the cutting edge of innovation and technology. I mean the iHubs and the NILabs in Nairobi. We started also looking at beyond the scientific community, because SDGs really is a political construct. So for us, data begin to also bring in individuals who would not necessarily be in this particular space. In our country, for example, these are all initiatives led by the presidency. 4 years ago, it would have been the Ministry of ICT. So we started seeing those new shifts in terms of understanding that really data is going to be the engine of global development in the future. I think in terms of even just conversations, for those who are here and the Kenyans who will be in the room, we know that civil society has always had a very antagonistic relationship with government. But looking at SDGs and data and the data roadmap, then you realize also that civil society has an intrinsic role. One example, for example, is Civicas. Civicas have been working with Twitter and local administration to map population densities, and that in turn working with us and the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. In about 6 months, they've been able to correct statistical samples around population densities. And that has been absorbed within the National Development Planning. Private sector. Private sector previously were contractors. It would really like take 1 year, for example, just to get something off the block. One quick example I'd mentioned that was facilitated by the roadmap and the national partnership was El Nino response. For those who know, during the El Nino phenomenon, it will have taken us about just 3 months to prepare. This time it took us a week, simply because we had access to Columbia University with their Earth data satellite. We had access to Red Cross. We were talking with the UN OCHA in terms of their data. The presidency convened that. We had a national response. And simply based on that ecosystem, State Department, I cannot forget to mention them because State Department didn't provide money, but they were able to sort of convene interns who are highly specialized in humanitarian efforts. And based on that collaboration, within a week we had a platform up. Within a week we had a baseline on El Nino that we never had before, simply because of multiple data sources. Within the 3 months of El Nino, we had a robust response system that saved the country $15 million. I mean, as simple as that, without infrastructure, without creating new infrastructure. So, I mean, that for us is what we're seeing as a future. So the future that is based on evidence, a conversation that brings in value for the whole country. In posterity, we're looking at perhaps how do we then scale that up. So for us, really, a roadmap is that conversation that brings everybody together. But it's most, and think about roadmap, right? So we're not talking about a plan. We're not talking about a log frame. It's a roadmap. So something that we can all agree, a road that we can all get on, and something that actually is interactive and all of us are finding sort of a way to engage and develop our own priorities. The other bit I think I wanted to bring upon is private sector, and because I'm sitting with a lot of private sector companies here, so
Surrounded by private
surrounded by private sector. I think is something that we're also seeing is this movement from CSR. The private sector companies we engaged, we are not engaging their CSR arms. We're engaging the core private sector business. So we see goal 17, for example, in SDGs, becoming real more than goal 8 of MDGs, where private sector simply gave us their CSR arms and looked at this as a development charity issue. We're looking at core business engaging. We're having a parliamentarian awareness meeting next month, and that is fully engaging private sector, but also fully supported by private sector. So we're seeing that kind of shift, I think, of relationships around roadmaps. And think about, these are national roadmap. A national roadmap ideally would have been a government document. Now we are seeing a complete ownership of a process and perhaps looking at co-creation. Last point is capacity and technology transfer. As I said, country like Kenya is an innovation leapfrog central. Previously, we would be looking at tools trying to retrofit, customize for our own populations from the West. The roadmap is showing us or painting a very different picture. We're actually beginning to see capacity and capability locally. And increasing enough in terms of concepts, we're actually finally seeing the possibility of a South-South collaboration. Colombia just released a platform yesterday on Data Republica. When they were presenting it, you could simply search Colombia, replace it with Kenya. It just works. Simply because I think our realities are similar, and even and our contexts are almost similar. But because that platform was created in the South, co-created by government, civil society, research institutions, then it's something that we can easily replicate in our country. So that, for me, is what I see as the future. The future really is co-creation.
Great. Thank you so much. It's really very inspiring to hear one strong political commitment combined with technological solutions, how we can really move much faster towards our ambitions. Now let's move to Emmanuel. You are the CIO of a major statistical agency, I know, which covers a big part of the international statistical community, with many of them far more advanced than others, and therefore has been also very proactive in responding to this very fast-changing environment. So from where you sit, could you tell us a bit about how indeed Eurostat has been really organizing itself and looking at where you will be heading and introducing some of the innovative approaches?
Thank you, Aisha. You mentioned in the introduction that I moved from one job to another, and when I moved into statistics, one of my friends told me, "Oh, why are you doing that? This is a boring sector." Now, I don't want to sort of go back to the statisticians being the sexy or the sexiest job in the new millennium, but listening to the panelists and the challenges that they bring to our community, is very much clear that this is an exciting job. It's exciting to be a statistician and an official statistician in this particular period. Now, obviously, this comes with a big burden, which is to try to make sure that this technological innovation, this data availability, is transformed into constant quality flows of statistical production. And this is, I think, very much clear in the mind of the leaders of the official statistical community. And what I want to talk about is what we are doing in Europe, mostly in Eurostat, but also Eurostat is part of a bigger partnership, which we call the European Statistical System. Is in fact the partnership of Eurostat and the statistical offices in Europe. And this partnership is particularly important because most of this innovation cannot happen if we work in isolation within the official statistical community. Philippe mentioned this at the end of his speech, that we need cooperation. And obviously we need cooperations also to harness the benefits of technology. And here I see two trends that I would like to sort of highlight. The first one is what Mark just said. Data are commodities in economic terms, so they're cheap to produce, and technology is much more available. The value is not, and it's not going to be in the data themselves, but it's going to be in how you use the data, how you combine the data, and how you extract value out of the data. And the second big trend, which is more on the demand side, and this is a bit, I mean, it's something that we would need to sort of continue consider very importantly in the statistical community, is that the users are also changing as a result of both the technology and the behaviors that are triggered by technological changes. Our users, the users of statistics, are not anymore interested in static content, which is not interactive, which is not tailor-made, which is not putting the users in the driver's seat. And if you look at our websites or our publications in the official statistical community in general, we are not there yet. I mean, we're moving. There are several interesting experiments in making our content more interactive, more based on the ability for the users to pick the information that they want and to assemble it in such a way that it's responding to questions. But still, we are producers of statistical products, not statistical services. So for me, one of the key innovations looking into the future is that statistical organization would need to think in terms of services, because services and statistical services in particular, given that our community is a community of statisticians, because services is where the value added is. Now, what is a service vis-a-vis a product? A product is GDP, a product is CPI, so indexes, and this will continue to be the bread and butter of a statistical organization. We will need to continue to supply this type of information. But for me, a service and an analytical service is what policy users, citizens, and stakeholders at large are requesting the statistical community to provide: an answer to a question. And to provide an answer to a question, a single figure is not enough. So you will need to provide a geographical context, for example, like in the first set of examples that were presented today, a map where you geolocalize the information, but you also need to provide information in such a way that you have the full picture. So if you're asking a question about the situation in the labor market, for example, in a country, a single indicator may not be enough. You would need to look at the demand side, the supply side, and then make sure that once you are presenting this information, it is done so in an integrated fashion that people can understand what is the story behind. And this is where statisticians need to become better communicators as well and become better storytellers. Now, technology can help us in providing the tools to both make the users the driver of the information consumption, so to say, and also to make sure that the information is put together in the right way. But obviously, you cannot do this in a naive way, and this is where I think that statisticians and the statistical community have some value to offer in the partnerships with the other, let's say, stakeholders. And this is where, and this is in the methods. We are statisticians. We are good at identifying and implementing the statistical methods which are of high quality and can produce the information that is requested by the users. So in this respect, I think that this is where the value of the cooperation and the partnership between statisticians and others can really bring more results. Let me quickly go through three big changes in the way the typical National Statistical Office or International Statistical Office in the future, in my view, would look like as a result of this transformation. And I see this thinking about a statistical office as a factory, if you want. This is not the case. It's, in fact, a knowledge generator. But if you think about a factory, you can easily split the production process into inputs, like in any production domain. You will need raw materials to produce your services and products. Then you have the factory at the center, the core engine, and then you have your outlet and what you offer to the public. So everything is changing, and if you ask me what will be the statistical office phase in a few years from now, probably it will look much more different from today and from the present in these three blocks. On the data side, on the input side, we heard that there are going to be more data of different formats, different structures, different content, and the statisticians are learning and need to learn even more how to combine this different information. We are good at collecting data on the ground. We have a good conceptual framework to do that. We have the infrastructure to do that. We can collect survey data. But we are good and increasingly good at using administrative data, which are already big but not big data and are already there. We are less exposed to new data sources. And we need to build environments from the technology point of view, but also from the cooperation point of view, so that we can access this data in a combined way. The input of the future in a statistical office will be a combination of these sources. It will not be replacing surveys with big data or replacing administrative data with surveys. It will be integrating this data so that they can maximize content. In the center of the factory, we need new engines. And here, if you look at the way a statistical office is organized, typically, we call it stovepipes. You have a single source, a survey, then you have a process that processes this survey, and the end result is a product. There is very little reuse of processing tools, very little reuse of the data. In the new world of multi-source, multi-mode data, this is not going to work. So we would need to look into the engine of our factory and see how the tools that we are using and the platform that we are using to process the data will need to change. And here again, as I mentioned before, the power will be to process the data with the right tools. In IT terms, you could call it the power of algorithms. Our algorithms are the statistical methodologies. And then finally, on the output side, I mentioned before, we need to go beyond the pure list of products, and we need to move into services, and particularly data analytics services, which are tailored to the users. And just quickly, what are we doing in Europe to make it happen? There is a big project and a visionary project. In fact, it's called the ESS, the European Statistical System Vision 2020. The ambition for Eurostat and the partners in the European statistical systems, the national statistical offices in Europe, is to create the building blocks that would make sure that we are able to produce statistical information and respond to new challenges, leveraging the technologies in these 3 blocks. And just to mention a couple of specific projects, we are now running a series of experiments on the use of big data and different sources of big data for the production of statistics. This ranges from data that are the result of online searches, data that are generated by mobile phone operators, data that are generated by sensors. These data are being used to produce experimental statistics in fields that go from population statistics, energy statistics, to capture mobility of people, to estimate poverty and income distribution, and so on and so forth. Now, for me, the big challenge, and this is also the conclusion, is to move from this experimental phase to full-fledged production. I mentioned at the beginning that the technology change and the new demands are game changers for us, but we are not a research institution. We cannot be happy if we are continually investing in research, pilots, experiments. What our users and stakeholders want to see is the production of new statistical indicators and new statistical services, which is relying as much as possible on the multiple data and multiple data tools that are available today.
Thank you so much. Very insightful. I'm really glad to see that we're no Harry Warners, right? We're already moving along with the trend, maybe leading the trend. I would like, indeed, for opportunity, the audience could ask some questions and comments on this discussion. So I would encourage you to move to the aisles so that we can give you the microphone easily. So while you're gathering thought and moving yourself, I would ask our panel another round of question, but just asking you to respond very quickly. You know, the US Chief Data Officer, DJ Patel, likes to say data science is a team sport. And one common thread through your discussions is indeed the collaboration with others across or among organizations and partners. I'm sure you have learned a great deal from this. Could you just share some thought in a minute or so? You know, what are the major features of this, and how do you see this can be strengthened if we were to indeed to achieve what you said? Maybe I'll start backwards. Emmanuel, if you want to start first.
Absolutely. Well, partnerships and collaborations are essential. We cannot do it alone, at least in the official statistical community. We are, I think, very much convinced that this is the case. I would say that there are 2 areas where I see the collaboration very important with other stakeholders. The first one is in accessing the data. Not all the data are in public hands, as we have heard, and the examples that were given by Molly, for example, are quite significant of how these partnerships and collaboration can mobilize data that are, let's say, not in the public domain for public use. In order to make it happen, based on the lessons that I've learned, you need obviously some kind of win-win statement and value proposition. And some of the data are held in private hands. They are value for the companies that are holding them. So you will need to find a common mutual benefit. For example, in the use of mobile network operator data, we found out that we as statisticians could give back something to the mobile network operator in the form of comparing data that were coming from mobile operator networks to statistics based on census data, for example. And that could provide a quality check of the company's data and at the same time also give an opportunity for statisticians to use this data. The other collaboration is with the developers community, the people who are building the algorithms that are processing the data, and here we need to be more engaged as statisticians with people who are coming from the data analysis community and data science community. We need to learn how to blend new techniques like machine learning with more statistical survey methodologies. And the way we're doing this in Europe, for example, is to build hackathons. There is one big European hackathon that we're organizing in March in the context of a conference called the New Technologies and Techniques for Statistics. And here we have organized this as a kind of European Cup, where we have national qualifiers at national level, where public and private teams have been competing for a seat in the finals, and then the finals will be held in Brussels in the mid of March. And this hackathon is supposed to give responses, so we have been giving the data to the developers, and we've been asking them to find good data analytics tools, develop tools that would be providing insight that can be reused by the official statistical community in Europe.
Great. Mark?
It's a great question, and I think there's two levels of answers. One is at the human level. I was on a panel discussion in Washington, D.C. not too long ago, and people were talking about the data scientist, and they were going through this long list of the skills and attributes of this person that would have to have. They'd have to know about statistics, they'd have to know about computers and algorithms, they would have, on and on and on. I said, are there any such humans in the world? I don't think that actually anybody knows all that stuff. Yeah. But there are teams of people that know all that. And if you get 4 or 5 people together with each with those skill sets and collaborate, then at that level, at the team level, you can accomplish these tasks that are very difficult for any individual. And so I think really that's the future of data science at the human level, is these collaborative teams of experts. But now take that up to the level of organizations. That type of collaboration is really key as well. And what we're seeing on a cloud platform is that it becomes a very powerful tool for collaboration, precisely because you can have a single source of truth, a single data set, which now multiple teams can work with without transporting copies around and all that. You actually get much more security in a model like that because, for example, we have a customer in the US, the National Database for Autism Research. And previously, when they shared very sensitive personal health information, brain scan data about the areas where they're researching, they would literally send copies on like hard disks to the different collaborating organizations, which made them extremely nervous because they really had no idea the provenance of that data afterwards. Of course, their collaborators would sign agreements, but they weren't sure what was going on with that data. And plus, they had a small number of collaborators because there was so much process and cost involved in that. Once they moved to a cloud platform and opened up their database and their APIs to those collaborators, now no one's making a copy of the data. They're accessing up-to-date data. They have access logs that show exactly who's accessing that data. But each party in that collaboration now, plus they get a lot more collaborators because the costs are lower and the friction is lower. So that's one example of what really is a closed data set, but it acts in a way like an open data set because the collaboration is so much enhanced. So I think you'll see that type of collaboration will become key as well. And experimentation on data, which is really a hallmark of this new data world. Again, competing teams, like we can now, it's conceivable and affordable to have 3 or 4 different teams all compete around the same data to say what are the best insights that we can extract, and do that in a friendly, competitive spirit as well as a collaborative spirit. So we see lots of really exciting things happening on the collaboration front.
Great. Philip.
I think in my view, I mean, if from the vantage area that I see it, because we are not in any specific silo, is exactly that. We are seeing the breaking of silos will be there, but silos will be talking. I mean, silos are not going anywhere. They're just not. So we've seen that, but increasingly we are seeing that the kind of collaboration now is that silos are beginning to talk to each other more, and data is that enabler. But also we are seeing this, you see, are more sporadic, organic, not organic, there are more champions doing stuff, but we're seeing more a sort of an institutionalization of this, right? In terms of it more being deliberate, being more resourced. I mean, previously, who'd fund a hackathon? You know, there was no log frame or, you know, or project planning. So we're seeing that. Sort of those sort of sporadic initiatives that were at the peripheries are now at the center. And they're really now the sort of drivers of policy. And going to policy as a third bit is, and my sort of visionary lead is here. I mean, he's the head of law and policy. So actually seeing that as being the center driver of innovation and technology. And if you see Mexico, it was the same. It was at the presidency somewhere at the policy office. So we're seeing policy driving innovation. In Kenya, M-Pesa came before policy. So we're seeing now policy innovating and being ahead and looking at how policy will actually ensure that it enables and facilitates innovation. So those are the two things we're looking at. And if you look at the future of work, I mean, innovation changes so rapidly that we must have sort of a deliberate innovative policy framework that keeps on catching up towards data innovation.
Yeah, great. Molly.
This really rings true to me. As a technology company, we really want to do good with our data, but we need partners to help us ask the right questions. And we've been really grateful to our partners for helping provide us with those questions. I think another common theme is bringing together different data sets. So taking the example of the population data set that we've been able to generate, our team was able to apply machine learning algorithms to satellite imagery in order to generate building estimates at scale. But then without CSIN taking census data and merging that in, and the World Bank helping to validate the data using anonymized surveys, we wouldn't be able to produce reliable estimates. So I think these partnerships are crucially important to being able to achieve anything. I also want to add that it's really important to build the right infrastructure and cross-functional relationships within companies. So I had a conversation about data stewardship earlier this week. In addition to this responsibility to use our data for good, we also have a responsibility to use data responsibly and in a manner that protects people and preserves their privacy. So in addition to the engineers, the analysts, the data scientists that I work with to execute on these projects, I also rely on the legal team, the security team, our privacy and research review groups to make sure that the way in which we're analyzing data keeps people's information safe and secure. And building those cross-functional teams has been crucially important to being able to do this work and to scale it.
Thank you. Really important points.
Yeah, I would just echo many of the points. Starting many years ago as a young, naive academic, I thought I could change the world by doing a nice analysis, mapping, publish that in the paper. Everyone would read it, change their policies. Fantastic. Doesn't really work like that. I'm working closely with ministries of health, national statistics offices. You immediately see that, and the problems that you think exist don't really exist in reality. And so it's got to be that very close engagement, listening to what the problems are, having one ear to the problem side, forming partnerships with UN agencies, and then one ear to the academic innovation side, and bringing those two together and forming teams that can meet those challenges. So just like there isn't one person who can do everything, I do know people who would love to have 26 billion mobile phone records. Myself, not. The National Statistics Office, probably not. But I know somebody who would love to that. But if I just gave that data to them and let them do what they wanted with it, they'd probably come out with something completely rubbish and not useful. So we've got to have that line of questions informing problems, informing the methods and the analysis. And finally, we have many other academic groups who are solely focused on academic research, and they're producing publications all the time. It's speedy research, but it's not filtering down to impact, and it's a much slower process working through that pipeline with ministries of health, with statistics offices. There's a lot of politics involved, but it's worth it, I think, in the end, to go through those pains.
Great, thank you. On that note, let me open up to our participants. If you could show me a hand for who would like to. I see one in the front. Microphone? Okay. Anyone else? All right. Let's gather a few questions. Please.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Shan. I'm John Pullinger. I'm the National Statistician of the UK. One trend I see looking 1 or 2 years down the horizon is that our community is getting much more drawn into not just the production of statistics, but also transforming the business of government itself. Better and cheaper public services, collecting more tax, dealing with fraud. Just interested in the panel's observations about whether they see that in other countries of the world. I think particularly Philip's example in Kenya, I think as the leapfrog country, the UK needs to learn from you. But I think government will be very different as a result of the data revolution. I see it coming in the UK. Maybe it's already coming to a few countries that you're observing. Interested in your views. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, the lady behind John. Yeah, let's do this.
Okay, thank you very much. I have actually two questions. The first one is more related to what Emmanuel said. We have been discussing like different sources of for data to get data, and one of these sources that we have been listening to since the first day of the conference is the big data, in addition to administrative data like the surveys and whatever we have. But at the same time, we have to take into consideration that whatever even systems we have in some of the countries, still it needs a lot of capacity building. It has to be improved. Now, what would be the best priority is to improve what I have now and or to initiate like more sources like the big data, which needs a lot of capacity building, and it means like cost consequences, especially if there are like budget constraints in some countries. This is the first one. And the second issue is related to the Facebook. I liked very much like to receive like the input from people to generate findings, and it will be used for the purposes of improving services at the end. But at the same time, it's for me, this is similar to any study, any survey you do, where people have to know that their data is used and for what purposes, because of the privacy and confidentiality. But how you can do that in the Facebook? How people can know that these data will be, or their input, will be used and for which purposes? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. There's another hand there. We'll take that, and then we'll move to the other side.
Hi, Megan Haddock from the Johns Hopkins Center for Civil Society Studies. There's been a lot of talk about how we can get a lot of better data on individuals and on people, and about the movements of people or disease incidents and things like that. But I'm curious also about data on institutions and economic units. These are also things that national statistics offices are very interested in collecting data on. And citing the case in Kenya that you brought up, you know, the implementation of the SDGs are going to require partnerships, and partnerships among multiple different kinds of actors. So how can the information that you all are working with help us glean better insights on institutions, economic units, and the partnerships between them? I mean, in particular, I'm interested in data on civil society organizations, and we also collect data on volunteering in a national accounts context. I mean, we've been working on satellite accounts on nonprofit institutions, so I come from that perspective.
Thank you very much. Let's get a couple of questions on this side. Yes, please. Microphone this way. Here. I will ask our panelists to respond maybe to one of the questions that you think that most drawn to you, because I was reminded that we must stop sharp at 10:30 for them to prepare for next session. I know there's so much that we can discuss. This is only the beginning of a conversation. Microphone here. Can you give this to this woman first? Thank you very much.
Al Hawad, I'm the head of the National Statistics Office of Palestine. I want to thank the panelists, and it's really very interesting. From the first day in this UN World Data Forum, we're talking about how we can enhance communication, collaboration, partnership. My actually intervention and question to Molly and actually Mark, we are really believe as National Statistical Offices in the social media tools. And your examples were your collaboration with World Bank, with OECD, I mean, and UNICEF. So you're talking about international donors and UN agencies. Well, as national statistical offices, we're using social media tools, and we know you are much better than us as statistical offices in the dissemination part. My direct question to you, are you willing to work and collaborate with national statistical offices? We have so many means and ways to develop the dissemination part with partnership with you. Are you willing to do so, or it's just limited to the international donors and UN agencies? Thank you.
Thank you. The gentleman behind you.
I'm Julio Santalla from INEGI, Mexico. My question is picking up on Molly's last comment on the safety or security of personal information. As national statistical offices, and one of the fundamental principles is the confidentiality of personal data. And we've heard several stories about different scandals where personal information is violated. So relying on a partnership with private sector, I mean, brings that risk up. I mean, of course, there are certain procedures to protect the data, but there's always the risk that something may fall into the wrong hands. How would you address that? Thank you.
Yeah. Let's take another question. That gentleman, yes, if you could keep it very succinct.
No problem. My name is Grant Oosterwijk. I'm from the University of Cape Town. I'm a doctoral student. My question goes back to the infrastructure part of big data. A lot of us are talking about the fact that the intelligence of distributed systems and databases inside of big data, but I'm concerned about the intelligence of computer networking when you need to get access to that specific big data when you're sitting all the way in South Africa. So what is, from an internet service provider, what is Facebook currently looking at from a distributed systems perspective, but looking from a computer networking and access perspective, especially when you are sitting in South Africa or in Ghana? That's basically my question.
All right, thank you very much. Let's turn to our panelists. If you could respond to any of the questions, either directly directed to you or relevant to you, but be brave. As I said, it's a conversation ongoing, so let's just have our first response.
Okay, let me address the question on whether big data should be a priority or not vis-a-vis existing, let's say, sources. And I wouldn't say that we should start from a discussion about the sources themselves. We need to have, obviously, an issue at stake. So, for example, if issues that we are related to timeliness, then big data sources have been proven in experiments to be able to provide any auxiliary information that, together with modeling, can help you release information on, let's say, labor market statistics or consumer confidence more timely. There are experiments that have been run in the European statistical systems community that show that for a certain level of aggregation, this can work. So timeliness could be one reason why you may want to invest in new data sources, including big data. Obviously, not exclusively, because you can also reach timeliness with the use of administrative data, for example, if this is the case, but typically big data are real time, and so you can get more information. The other advantage is more detailed breakdowns of the data. Sometimes you may have survey data which are significant at a certain level of aggregation, but you may want to have information estimated at the lower level, and again, you can use additional sources, which could be administrative sources or big data sources, to gain more detailed breakdown of the information.
Good. Mark?
This is challenging to go back over all the questions in one's mind, but I'll try to pick out, I think, two or three that I can perhaps provide some help on. So on the one of the last questions on the question of data leakage and data spills, privacy issues that occur when there's some kind of data breach. You know, in general, this problem exists today with lots of government systems. It's not limited purely to the private sector. And from our perspective, as a technology platform provider, we're actually not in the data business per se now, in the sense that we provide compute and storage and isolated and secure capability for people to use. And we have a really strong track record on security of the platform. but you still need to use the platform properly to use it securely. Now, the good news is, that was earlier, we had our breakout session, there was an expert there from UNICEF who's really looked closely at a lot of these issues, and he said, yeah, of course, your cloud platform is more secure than the typical private data center. So I was glad to hear that people are getting that message, because I really believe that that's true. But at the same time, it's not a panacea. You still have to use the systems properly, and that's a responsibility for all of us. So I think that the challenges exist today to use data securely, and I think modern technology and greater degrees of automation and using the technologies of DevOps, where your security is built right into your development process, all these things can actually improve the security of the data, keep it more private, even as you're modernizing, even as you're using new tools. So I think there's some really good possibilities for actually improvement in that area. On the question of working with national level, now, this is actually a really important point. I'm in a sales organization, right? And this is really important. We believe our business interests are aligned with helping countries, helping international bodies to move to these, to use these new platforms, use this new technology. Now, we make a lot of, we do credits, we provide free access on all these things, but ultimately we believe you will be paying customers, and we believe you'll be happy paying customers. And so our business interests directly align with the use of new technology. So yes, we're absolutely interested in working at the national level, and we would be delighted to talk to you about exactly how we might help you in these modern collaborations. And back to, I think, the very first question, just briefly, this is much broader than the statistics world. Big data in government is everywhere, and the quality of citizen service, the quality of decision making is being improved across the board, and we see this absolutely as a groundswell. To take a couple of quick examples, both in the United States with FINRA, in the UK with FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, the financial industry regulators, realizing that they were way behind the industry they were regulating in terms of their technological sophistication, are building really state-of-the-art platforms for analyzing everything going on in the high-speed trading markets and the stock markets that they've had really lost a handle on what was actually happening in those markets. Now they're jumping to the head of the line with state-of-the-art tools so that they have a good possibility of actually maintaining safe and secure markets, detecting fraud, all the things that had become very difficult as the industry modernized and the regulation didn't modernize. So that's just one of many examples that we could talk about across the board, the data-driven changes that are going on in government. It's a very exciting time.
Thank you. Before we get the mic for you, could Molly respond?
Absolutely. There's so many great questions, so it's hard.
You don't have to answer all of them.
To address the question about governments very quickly, yes. I work with a global team of people who work to teach governments how to use Facebook effectively. And we've seen this be a really, we've seen many, many examples of government agencies, public officials using the platform to hear from their constituents and also to reach constituents. So I believe that's one of the really wonderful uses of the platform, and absolutely, yes is the answer to your question. There was a theme about privacy and security, and I want to emphasize that that is something we take extremely seriously and kind of as a first principle for anything we do in this. All of the examples I talked about and all of the work we're planning to do is focused on aggregated, anonymized data that has been carefully vetted by our privacy, research, review, and security teams to make sure that it can't be traced back to individuals, and also that individual level data remains on secure servers. So that's something that we take extremely seriously and have built the internal capacity at Facebook to live up to our responsibility to the people we serve.
Great. Philip?
Yeah. So I think in terms of governments, I think we are one example where the statistical office is part of the national partnership, and through the global partnership, they're able to work with the larger companies and ecosystem. So maybe it's to look at how you can join the global partnership. Maybe that's one quick example. Second thing I think is in terms of, yes, UK, I think, yes, governments are now being forced to innovate and to change how we work. Something for a quick example we are doing now is, yes, we have a statistical law, but then because of the partnership where we need to share data between private sector, civil society, citizens, crowdsourced data, all those forms of data, we're innovating something called a data management bill. So the entire ecosystem is innovating to see how we can create a law that enables us at least to share what we call, to sort of volunteer what we are calling minimum shareable data. data that is not necessarily subject to privacy and all that. So maybe that's something we can engage with the UK and other governments that are interested.
Yeah, thank you, Philip, and thank you for mentioning the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, with whom we organize this session. Indeed, join, so we can really find new opportunities. Andy, very briefly.
Quick. I can see the clock ticking down, so I will just say, the questions about, there's a lot of interest on mobile network operators and security of that data. So if you, within Flowminder, we have a lot of partnerships with operators across low and middle income countries, and if you want to hear more and go into detail, come to meeting room 2.64 in 15 minutes. There's a session on mobility using mobile network operator data.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So with the final 2.5 minutes, let me ask you a round of last questions. This has been a really very inspiring discussion, but I wonder, what is the story that you would like to tell at the next Global World Data Forum in 2 years' time, and what do you think that you can help to achieve that? Maybe I'll start from Mark.
Well, I'll
30
give
seconds.
A teaser on the next session of TA2.01, a global policy and technology framework. I think there'll be some very interesting discussions there about a UN framework for a platform model, and I don't want to give it away, but please come. But in the meantime, I would like to say very publicly that we're working very closely with World Bank on some projects that I believe will be very exciting, the opportunity for the statistical offices to modernize and reach these new, get access to these new technologies. And our company is committing $500,000 in cloud credits, so essentially free cloud usage to get these programs off the ground so that we can help move people into the future.
Thank you. Molly?
Yeah, so I gave a few examples of ways in which we've worked with the public sector. I hope that in 2 years we have more examples than we can count. I think we need better frameworks for public-private partnerships so that we can move really really nimbly, really efficiently, and in a way that scales to make insights available to organizations in every part of the world at all different levels so they can make better decisions.
Thank you. That's really important point. I think that's also what the new global partnership aim to do, is to create that framework and the practical means for us to collaborate. Andy?
I think it's really exciting being here, hearing about all the new data sets, methods, and there's a big move in data philanthropy at the moment, and making available huge data sets, large amounts of information. I think the next trend is moving on from that data philanthropy to maybe analytics and insights philanthropy. Again, not many of us want to be handed 26 million phone records or 5,000 kilometers of satellite image. We might not know what to do with it, but it's turning that into actionable information is where I think we need to head.
I love that idea. Philip, and then we'll go to Emmanuel.
In my case, two things. I think in 2 years, we need to have seen how these collaboratives have evolved. More conversations between the statistical community, the data community, the policymakers, and the different ecosystems, whether it's private sector, civil society, entrepreneurs. The other bit, I think, is more people stories. Beyond platforms, beyond technologies, beyond relationships, ultimately it's about people. So I think in 2 years, we want to see, I hope that we'll see more people more impact.
Great. You have the last word.
And for me, in 2 years from now, I'm pretty sure that we will be able to tell a story about not only projects and pilots, but also implementation of the new methods of production of statistics, and that this would lead to a wider coverage of the SDGs indicators than it is today.
Thank you. On that optimism, let's close this session. Thank you all for joining. I know it's already the last day. It's hard, but thank you for our panelists.
Thank you.
A great session indeed. Oh, by the way, there's an announcement. Any representative from International Disability Alliance, please meet Wanda Daz outside this room after this session. Thank you.